On today's podcast, we have the brilliant mind behind Daredevil Production, Johnny Dwinell. Johnny uses country superstar Luke Bryan and Universal Records to illustrate today's music promotion landscape and shares his insights on the astounding cost to promote a single in the major market. We also dive into how digital platforms can help new artists efficiently build a fan base, and Johnny stresses the importance of nurturing core audiences into superfans. We also get into the differences between broadcast and digital platforms, highlighting tips from people such as Gary Vaynerchuk and success stories like Taylor Swift. This episode is jam-packed with insider secrets on reach, frequency, and strategic digital marketing. You can't afford to miss it. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we have a raw and insightful interview with Johnny Dwinell, a music industry maverick and co-founder of Daredevil Production. Johnny gives us a 360-degree view of the current music promotion landscape, using Luke Bryan and Universal Records as a prime example. We dive into the staggering cost of promoting a single on major market country radio, reaching up to $1 million. A real eye-opener for many aspiring artists out there. Johnny also shares some game-changing advice for new artists, advocating a shift towards digital platforms for efficiently building a fan base, comparing it to a minor league development process. We talk about the power of relationship building, the critical difference between digital and broadcast platforms, and why persistence and repetition are key in your promotional strategy. We also discuss the importance of consistency in digital marketing, how Joe Bonamassa has mastered his promotions, and strategies for tracking user data to optimize ticket sales. Whether you're curious how Megan Moroney's social media presence has skyrocketed her career, or seeking insights on repeated exposure in marketing, this is an episode packed with insights and tremendous value. And don't miss out on Johnny's take on how to efficiently engage and expand your audience, the disparity between traditional radio and digital media, and the essentials of nurturing your core audience into superfans. So stick around. You don't want to miss this compelling conversation with Johnny Dwinell. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders! Are you an aspiring musician, artist, band, or future music business professional looking to take your career to the next level? Well, look no further. At MUBUTV, we offer personalized career counseling and coaching designed specifically for folks like you.
Imagine having both of us by your side, guiding you through every step of your music journey. Our sessions are tailored to meet your unique needs, focusing on critical aspects of your music career, such as refining your songs, defining your artist story, identifying your target audience, and enhancing your social media presence, just to name a few.
Whether you're just starting out or looking to elevate your existing career, we've got you covered. Our comprehensive approach ensures you get insights on everything from live shows to branding and marketing strategies. We understand that every artist is unique. That's why our coaching is personalized just for you.
And here's the best part. We offer flexible coaching packages that fit any budget. Choose from individual sessions ranging from 30 to 90 minutes, or save with our discounted 4-session packages. Experience custom sessions designed to enhance your music career, with opportunities for greater savings when you choose bundled sessions. Investing in your musical journey has never been more accessible.
Imagine the clarity and direction you'll gain after just one session. The feedback on your songs, the strategies to grow your audience, and the confidence to perform live, all tailored just for you.
So why wait? Don't let uncertainty hold you back. Join us for your free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com for a transformative coaching experience that will elevate your music career. That's book.mubutv.com.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is music industry marketing expert Johnny Dwinell. This was a fascinating, deep dive conversation.
This is
really, really interesting. I mean, I don't think we've ever had anyone on the show get into the depth
and the granularity
and the understanding of marketing in today's music business the way that Johnny did. Absolutely. Really, really fascinating. I mean, you know, the way he talked about digital platforms for new artists, you know, how they need to focus on digital platforms to efficiently build, you know, fan bases by targeting pioneers and early adapters. That was the thing that I remember him talking about. Pioneers and early adapters. Those are the people who come on board first.
Right.
And it's so important. You need to develop that. This is not something, this isn't the old, and this is what I loved about the conversation with Johnny, Eric, is that this is not the old days where you just had a record.
Right.
And you played it at, the one radio station played it to millions of people and it became something that people bought. Digital is much more of a one-to-one kind of thing.
Right.
And you build your relationship with your audience that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I talked about the whole idea that he laughed about, the whole idea that you're running for like a president and you're doing, you're hugging the babies, you're kissing the babies, you're shaking hands.
Yeah.
And it's that one-on-one attrition. It's like a battle for attrition. One of the things that I really loved, I mean, there were so many things that I loved about this interview. I don't even know where to begin, but I'll try, was the idea of customer identification. Johnny emphasizes the importance of understanding marketing and customer identification in the music industry, suggesting that artists must focus not just on creating music, but also on effectively marketing. And we talk about this all the time, you and I, that, you as an artist, people that are out there tend to dedicate, and are very passionate about getting their music together, and you put so much time, effort, and energy into it. But then when it comes to marketing, it's like it just gets out there and then that's it. There's no follow through, and that's the biggest disconnect with a lot of artists.
Yeah, it's a perception issue.
Correct. They think that it's out and it's like, I already did everything that I'm going to do and that's it. And that's when the battle is just beginning. That's just when you're just getting off the gate. And so I think that it's, this is such a crucial interview for people to listen and maybe go back and listen to again, because he goes into such deep granularity with this interview. And there's so many nuggets in here that, it's just endless.
I totally agree with you, Eric. I couldn't agree more. He has a very, very solid sense and an understanding of what is going on in today's market. He really understands this. He understands it philosophically and he understands it practically, from the aspect of new artists and like what new artists need to be doing. One of the things that I thought was so interesting, and which a lot of people don't get, and what you were just talking about with artists, is they think it's all about their music. Right. Well, in the marketing aspect of today, here's the part that's, I think, so important of what he talked about, the user-generated content. Now, what exactly is that? It's the whole idea of consistency in content creation. Content creation is your social media, your posts, your logo, the visual look and identity, how you come across, what kinds of video you use, what's the image, how everything comes together in terms of communicating who you are as an artist.
Right. So
important. I learned that truthfully from you, watching you do that over the years. You were an expert at that, understanding, the way you did that with the band, the colors, the choices, the images.
Correct.
What you wanted those things to communicate, the desolate kind of, apocalyptic element that you communicated with the album cover, the merch elements.
Right.
All of that.
All of that. Yeah. It's such a, you're building a world. You're building a universe.
Exactly.
You're building your universe.
Yes. But you did it with the very specific elements.
The messaging is all the same. And
exactly. You had a consistency in the messaging, and it's not just about your song, who you are, who is the band, what are they about?
How to build the story around the music.
What is that story?
Right.
And where's that setting? What's that about?
And that's getting back to what I said earlier in the earlier point where we were talking about the customer identification and understanding that, how to market this in a correct way versus just hodgepodging and just like, okay, it's done and that's it. There's so much more, guys, out there that you have to do in order to build your story and your narrative. And we've been harping on this episode after episode because it's truly important. This is what really sets you apart from everybody else that's doing this. One of the other areas that I thought was very interesting, again, there were so many areas that I don't know where to begin, but promotion versus creation investment. Dwinell underscores the disparity in budget allocations within the music industry, advocating for greater investment in promotion rather than just creation. Forget about the music industry as a whole with, major companies, record companies. Let's talk about our audience, which are independent artists that are trying to do this on their own. Again, getting back to the whole idea, you spend all your time creating your music, and then you have to go out there and promote it. You have to set, if not 1 to 3 times more of what you spent on just creating the music into your marketing, whatever that happens to be. That doesn't mean you have to have $1 million budget, whatever budget it is that you allocate for doing this, but it has to be used effectively. And I think that's one of the points that a lot of people are missing today when they're marketing their own music, is that they don't have an idea or concept of where they should be putting the money into. And so, those are hopefully some of the things that we're going to be going into more detail with people and sharing with the audience.
Absolutely. And, I cannot encourage you guys enough to spend time with this episode. Listen to it again and again. Johnny really has a strong understanding of not only the market, but what you need to do step by step. Absolutely crucial.
And with that, insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Johnny Dwinell.
Johnny, welcome.
Welcome. Hey, guys. Thank you. I say welcome. I'm used to being on the other end of the mic there.
No problem. It's great to have you. Listen, we always like to start these conversations with the question, when did you know that the music business was going to be your professional career path?
Oh, that's funny. It was the most eloquent way to put that was from Tim Nichols after a songwriting festival. We were driving together back to Copenhagen. He's like, you didn't choose music chose you. And it chose me. I was 8 years old, and my parents took me to a Neil Diamond concert at Alpine Valley, Wisconsin. And
Wow.
I just knew, I was like, that's what I want to do right there.
Yeah, and he's quite a showman.
And that was like, I was 8. So I'm older now. That was right after he cut his hair. So that was old Neil Diamond, and it was a little bit more rock and roll Neil Diamond, and it was amazing.
Right.
Thanks so much, Johnny, for joining us on the show. I wanted to ask you, you've often spoken about how many artists mistakenly rely on platforms like Spotify to break them. And I'm curious, with the shift towards data-driven marketing, what platform should they use to understand their audiences?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, let's talk about Spotify and all the streaming services for a second, and then I'll answer the question. The music industry and the artists trying to get into the music industry are conflating Spotify and streaming services with terrestrial radio. It just feels like the digital version of terrestrial radio. They both pay, right? It doesn't matter how you feel about how they pay, but they both pay, and because you get publishing money on radio. And but the difference is that radio, when terrestrial radio worked, was the most powerful promotional tool that there was, and Spotify is not. Spotify is a distributor, and the difference between distribution and marketing, distribution is where somebody goes to consume something, and marketing is why they go there. But I think that's the knot that I try to untie, because it's like the odds of you pulling a Dasha and uploading independently and getting a song that just gets on editorial playlist and gets 150 million streams and getting a record deal on Spotify, it's like a lottery ticket.
Right.
It can happen. There needs to be promote the platforms where we're headed now. I know that there must be some artists who broke on Spotify, but if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you who they were. But I can give you 2 handfuls of names of artists who broke on YouTube and TikTok. And so, it's which ones do you want to focus on? Well, there has to be some visual elements to brand the artist to the song and the song to the consumer. So we focus on those platforms: TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and it's video content to promote the song. And we've had a kind of a recent breakthrough, which is really interesting, that has created real sticky fans, and that's the idea.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing you say that, Johnny, because one of the phrases that I once heard, and somebody was having a conversation about the very subject you were just talking about, which is that, part of the problem today, beyond just the artists, is that there's so much music without context out there today, and that's exactly what, in a metaphoric sense, that's what you're talking about. And the other element is, for artists, and I've heard you speak about this, and I'd like you to address it further, is, for artists, how do they identify the so-called pioneers and early adapters of new music? And can you talk about why this group is so critical for an artist's growth?
wow, you guys did your homework. I'm impressed. This is cool. I mean, props to you guys. What you're talking about and what I've discussed is it's you can research it. It's called the law of diffusion of technology, but it's also the law of diffusion of marketing. So it looks like a bell curve, if you will. You have to envision a bell curve, and the pioneers are and so if I put this in the context of technology, if you'll allow me to do that, I think it'll make more sense, and then we'll extrapolate it to the music business. But the pioneers are the first 2.5% of the total marketplace. The pioneers are the people that stood in line, that slept out on the sidewalk overnight by an Apple store to get their very first iPhone 4 in 2007. They know it's going to be buggy. They know it's going to be very expensive. These are the same people who paid $40,000 for the first flat screen when they came out. They've got to be first, and they're totally willing to do that. Pioneers, very important part of marketing, but they don't pay the bills. Next is the early adopters. They're 12.5% of the total marketplace. They want to be first-ish. So these are the people that are going to wait 6 months on that iPhone or on that flat screen because they know the price is going to come down and they're going to get a lot of the bugs worked out, and they'll get to be first on their block, but maybe not first on the planet. Together, what's important about the early adopters is to understand that that 12.5% of the marketplace doesn't come into the market until after the pioneers. Okay. And the pioneers and the early adopters combined still don't pay the bills. And what everybody is shooting for, where the hockey stick happens on your brand growth, your sales, and your acceptance, is the early majority, which is 38%. And then the late majority, which is 38%. And again, the early majority doesn't come into the market until after the early adopters, and the late majority doesn't come into the market until after the early majority. Now, when you connect this with one of my favorite quotes from one of the world's best marketing gurus, Seth Godin, who sums up marketing in 7 very eloquent words, he says, "People like us buy products like that." And if we apply that to the music industry, people like us love artists like that. So, and Seth said this exactly. If you look at like the Nirvana Nevermind record, the first 300,000 or 400,000 records were purchased by people who really freaking love Nirvana. That was the pioneers, and that was the early adopters. And then the other 9.6 million were purchased by people who want to identify with the pioneers and the early adopters of Nirvana. And why that's important is because we can't deny the power of terrestrial radio when it was working to launch artists. It was the best tool in the world, the most powerful, but also mathematically restrictive. But when you're doing broadcast marketing, which is radio, terrestrial, one to many, or television, one to many, you're reaching everybody at the same time, and that's why the cost is so high. And if the audience is captive like it used to be with radio, it's extremely effective, but now it's not. So what does that make possible? When we look at digital marketing with artists, we can identify who the pioneers and who the early adopters are, and only focus on spending our money to build that up until that critical mass happens and we get to the early majority part. So let me give you like now a music industry example of this. I always use Luke Bryan and Universal Records as an example. So Luke Bryan's at the top of the food chain, iconic artist. I mean, I think he's the only country artist that ever had 6 number ones off the same album. He's even bigger now since he got on television with American Idol. And in country music, which is the largest platform now, most radio stations are programmed to country music, costs $1 million to promote a P1 radio single in major markets. And when you factor that in, you understand that there's millions of people that love Luke Bryan. However, the country music radio audience that doesn't like Luke Bryan is equally as passionate. They think he's the devil. They think that he started bro country, ushered in this new sort of subgenre and changed it forever in a way that they don't like. So when Universal's spending $1 million to promote a Luke Bryan single, they're spending a ton of money to put their product in front of people that they know don't like it or will never be a consumer of Luke Bryan. Now, there's a nuance here, because when you're at the top of the food chain, this is where, currently, this could change tomorrow, but currently terrestrial radio still works for bigger brands. So the juice is worth the squeeze for Universal and Luke Bryan because he's so high up. But when you take a different lens and take the icon lens off and you put on the I'm a brand new artist on Universal lens on, and they're going to go spend $1 million of your very limited budget to try to break you on radio, that's a problem, because you're spending all this money to get to the early and the late majority. They're not going to come in yet. So it's much more cost effective to digitally identify the pioneers and the early adopters, create the repetition on digital platforms to sort of, let's say, mimic rotational format programming of terrestrial radio, and just focus on the people who are really digging the content right now, and then it'll blow up and you go from there. That's the difference.
Right. It's almost like you're doing proof of concept first for the artist, and then doing that through kind of like, almost like if you use the sports analogy, you're using the minor leagues and putting them through the minor leagues. And then once they get to that next level, then of course you can really put the jets on. Yeah.
That's one way of putting it. But as long as you understand that there's, in this law, it's a law of diffusion of technology and a law of diffusion of marketing. There's no way to get to the major leagues without going through the minor leagues. So why would you pay major league money when you're still in the minor leagues, right? So it's really focusing on building that core audience, 1,000 super fans, and then if you do 1,000 super fans, you can do 10,000 super fans.
Right.
And, think of it this way, and this is tricky for indie musicians and people in the industry because music chose them. And we have to remember we have the curse of knowledge, so you can hear something once and hear it three-dimensionally. You're listening to that kick drum and you're like, oh, that's awesome. And you can hear that's a Fender P bass, and you look, oh, it's got a lot of hair on it. Maybe your ear is sophisticated enough to know that's Michael Rhodes, God rest his soul, on the P bass. But the average consumer doesn't have that knowledge. So that, you might be the person in your high school that was like the first ones that were on to, I was into like hair metal and rock bands. I was the first, like Queensryche EP came out. Me and my friends, my guys in my band, we were all over that, right? But it took a long time to get the head of the cheerleaders on board with Queensryche.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the early majority there.
Right.
That's when that happens.
What do you feel are the most important things that artists need to do to take full control over their fan relationships and not relying on middlemen like streaming services, or does it depend on the artist?
I don't think it depends on the artist. I think the fundamentals are the same for every artist. And when I have, management meetings and label meetings, I have to remind them, like, the fundamentals are the same, right? And the fundamentals are get the art and the artist in front of as many eyeballs as possible, as often as possible, and the world will change. Okay. If that artist is compelling and those songs and those sound recordings are competitive, people are going to stand up and salute, but they need more than once or twice to hear it. So I think you focus on, do not confuse a social media or digital platform, whether it's social media or streaming or whatever. Do not confuse that with a broadcast platform. And the waters are muddy, because if you think about this through the mindset, through the mindset of, let's say, a major label, somebody working at a major label or a major management company, like the deep end of the gene pool in the music industry, these people are working with multi-million-dollar brand names who all had millions of fans that were created through terrestrial radio for social media. And then social media comes out and everybody floods to social media to follow that artist because they know, like, and trust that artist. They know that brand. And then all of a sudden that your iPhone feels like a broadcast tool, right? Somebody like Taylor Swift can say one word about an unknown artist named Kelsey Ballerini, and boom, just like that, there's lightning in a bottle, and she's now a star. But so, Johnny, you can say 250 million followers, Taylor Swift, that's one to many. The digital platform is one to one. And when you say, well, yeah, but, Taylor's got 250 million followers, that's one to many. She can say one thing and blow up Kelsey Ballerini. And I'll say these are true statements. When was the last time you got together with your best friends, you streamed your device to the big screen and you all looked at your Instagram feed together? Everybody goes, ew. Yeah, it's one-to-one first. That's a different psychological exchange than one-to-many. And I think this is the biggest disconnect that artists are having, because they want this to behave like a broadcast platform. And you mentioned relationships. It really, in a one-to-one exchange, is about relationships. So here's why this is important. Like the best example of this, the best illustration is, let's talk about what a psychological broadcast exchange looks like. Picture yourself in a stadium with 100,000 people watching Guns N' Roses, and you've got Axl Rose, and he pulls his cell phone out of a pocket, holds it up in the air. He's like, everybody get your cell phones out right now! We all do it, right? Because we all paid a lot of money to be there. We're prepared to experience this as a group of people. Some of us do it because Axl told us to, but most of us do it because everybody else is doing it, right? And we're hardwired like this tribally as human beings. The reason that you learn to walk and talk, and the reason that you learn to, let's just take walk and talk, is because everybody else was doing it and you wanted to do it too. So in a broadcast exchange, whether we are aware of it, whether we believe it, and whether we like it or not, the crowd factors in to how we think and how we behave. That doesn't mean that you're a sheep or you're a cowboy. It just means that, like, the most benign example of this would be a slow burning standing ovation. You're sitting down, everybody starts clapping, a couple people stand up, you're like, oh, okay, and then a couple more, and all of a sudden the corner of the room standing up, and you've got a little pressure. No matter what you decide to do, if you remain sitting or if you decide to stand, you can't make this decision without having to process this information. If half the room stands up, then now am I making a statement by sitting down, saying that it wasn't that good? I really liked it. I don't know if it's good enough to stand up, but now there you are. That's the way that works. Another really sort of good example to put this in perspective is your personal friend group. You've got a group of friends. You all know, like, and trust each other. If a new person comes in and rubs you the wrong way, it's possible that you can be influenced by your friends to say, hey, man, he really wasn't that bad. He came across a little edgy, but if you give him a shot, I think you'll find out he's a good guy. With that information right there, it's possible that you're going to rethink your decision on this. So that's broadcast. We take information from the crowd, without even being aware of it, right? You're a brand new movie theater. The movie's over. You don't know where the garbage cans are. You just follow the crowd and you watch what everybody else is doing. There it is. That's where you throw your empty popcorn bucket. But now if we go to digital, which is consumed one-to-one, there is no information coming from the crowd to guide your interpretation of this relationship and what it's about to happen. So therefore, and Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V says this all the time, you got to love them first, right? Because they're in the limbic part of their brain. It's the fight or flight mode of their brain. And they have to determine, before they can get to know you, before they can create that relationship and deepen it and get to any frontal cortex, logic, art, these kinds of things, they have to know, like, do you give a crap about me and my family? Because if you don't care. So here's the illustration of that. Let's take the fame part of Axl Rose out of it. And let's say that you make an appointment and to have a cell phone salesman come to your home. You're expecting this person. They show up, they knock on the door, they come in. We all know how salespeople act. They're trying to, like, oh, hey, nice pictures, a great home, I love it. They're trying to create rapport to get you out of the limbic part of the brain, because that's where you are. Now, if this person walks from the front door into the kitchen, jumps up on the kitchen table and says, let me see your cell phones right now. Same message, same delivery, same tone. How do you feel? You're like, get the hell out of my house, right? Like, this is one-to-one. Like, this does not only is it ineffective, It has the polar opposite effect. It's a turnoff, like you're crazy. So you have to understand as an artist that until you build up this brand name big enough that it becomes magnetic and people are coming to you, you're the salesperson at the door. You have to love them first. Mystery is history. So how do you connect with your fans? And, Taylor Swift is a master of this because she was young enough to break on radio. She still broke on radio. Let's not forget that. But
she's still
she knew
part of the old model.
Yeah, she knew exactly how the new model worked too. And that's one of the reasons why she's one of the biggest artists on the planet. So you focus on the fundamentals. And I think it's astonishing to me to see labels still doing this and to see management companies still doing this. And the crisis that we're kind of discussing right now in the music industry is a huge opportunity for the artists who are going to adapt first, right? And I always tell people, the Chinese word for crisis is two characters. One stands for danger, and the other stands for opportunity. You've never seen a sponsored ad of an artist from a major label in your feed, so it's a blue ocean. They're still trying to do radio. But if we go back to the fundamentals of marketing 101, radio, the reason radio works so well is because it's firmly anchored in the fundamentals of marketing. You're going to reach millions of people. Rotational format programming creates the frequency over and over and over and over and over. They're going to hear that song, right? But and when a label decides to open the purse strings and launch a single for radio, they know that it's a long haul, that it's a grind. We're going to go 6 to 9 months. We're going to grind. Everybody's going to work. We're going to try to get as many ads as we can. We're going to try to identify the best markets. We're getting the most spins. And when the dust settles after 6 to 9 months, we're going to look and see how much the needle moved and decide if we should continue another 3 to 6 months or maybe try to do a real estate swap for the second single. But the same label with the same knowledge of marketing, when they go to a digital campaign, if it doesn't go viral in 2 weeks, it's a failure. The grind. Where's the repetition, right? I mean, when you think about that approach and apply it to terrestrial radio, it sounds ridiculous, right? Oh, it's been on the radio for 2 weeks and we're not a household name yet. Pull the plug.
But Johnny, this is something that you've talked about before. As I'm listening to you, I'm remembering, an interview you once gave where you talked about this very thing, and you said, I believe the quote was, artists in the industry often miss the mark by not asking the right questions in digital marketing. So my question to you then on this conversation, because you just reminded me of it, is what are the essential questions that artists should be asking?
Okay, we'll start from the fundamentals, right? We know that we need to have reach and frequency. How are we going to get that, right? With rotational format probing and audience, the program director decides what you're going to hear. But a song in heavy rotation that's 70 spins a week, you're going to hear that about probably once every 2 hours, So the psychological fundamental behind that is the number 7, right? It's well known in the music industry as well as in the advertising industry and in politics that the human being needs to hear a message 7 times before it becomes subconsciously recognizable. So let's talk about just real quick sidestep. What does subconsciously recognizable mean? That's where the brain stops filtering it out. And a great illustration of that is just think about whatever automobile you're driving right now, whether it was your dream car, whether it was a practical vehicle to get you from point A to point B, whether you bought a brand new, whether you bought it used, it doesn't matter. You know the brand, you know the model, you're well versed in everything that this vehicle should be able to do and not do. And you have a reasonable expectation of the quality of this vehicle, how long it's going to last, etc. There's no surprises. But yet, between 1 hour and 1 week after you purchased that car, you're sitting at a stoplight and you're like, where the hell did all these Honda Civics come from? They were always there. It's that your brain filtered out the information. Now that it's relevant and personal to you, you're starting to see them. That's subconsciously recognizable. So when you go back to the music industry with this is why rotational format programming, because the music industry people, they understand this, right? There's 2016 spins a week for a terrestrial radio station, If all it took was a great song and one spin, they'd be breaking way more artists than they would, but it's not. We've got to do rotation, and we've got to keep rotation happening for months and months and months to get that across. So when you have to look at how it's consumed, radio was consumed. We're a captive audience. We didn't have any other choices before streaming except for what we owned. And the program director decides what you're going to hear. But now think about how you consume video content, let's say, on your social media feed. If you see a piece of video once that randomly comes into your phone, what makes you click on it? You got to just be paying attention to, why do I want to click this right now? Number two is, you watch this piece of content, and let's say you absolutely love it. It does what's supposed to do. Makes you laugh, makes you cry, makes you mad, makes you think. It was entertaining. For whatever reason, you love it. And you don't feel like that, 3.5 minutes of your life was wasted. Now, let's say a week later, one of your besties shares that same piece of content, and it comes into your feed again. If it was really, really good, maybe you watch it a second time, but you're never going to watch it a third time because your brain says, I already saw that. So when we go back to terrestrial radio and we talk about rotational format programming, the first time that your average consumer, again, remember, curse of knowledge if you're a musician or an industry person, when the average consumer, the first time they heard Indian Outlaw from Tim McGraw in 1994 was really like the seventh time, because it went in one ear and out the other, because we don't know who Tim McGraw is. We don't understand his voice. We don't know the brand name. There's nothing recognizable. And after you hear it 7 times, then you begin to pay attention to it. That's not where you make a fan, but that's where it starts, right? And if you think about the number 7 here in terms of like advertising, that's why the same ads keep coming over and over. We're just about up on an election here. It's both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter what time you're on. If you go to either one of those channels and you watch all the different shows, the talking heads are saying exactly the same thing, because they're trying to get a message across and trying to pound that into our heads. You might have heard tell a lie 7 times and it becomes the truth, right? This is a psychological fact. So now back to, if we can't get past 3 views on the same video on digital, how do we get to 7? These are the right kinds of questions that we're asking, right? So, okay, let's look at, how do people break on TikTok, right? I look at that and I see, let's take like Old Town Road or Fancy Like. Those 2 songs broke huge on TikTok. So think about how people are consuming it, right? Fancy Like Applebee's on a first date, swipe up. Fancy Like Applebee's on a first date, swipe up. Fancy Like Applebee's. You get the point, right? There's all these, it went viral, and all these different people are dancing and filming themselves dancing. So you have people listening to the same hook over and over and over again, but it's synced to different video content that, in the case of a viral video, is user-generated content. God bless us all if we go viral. Viral shouldn't be, by the way, a destination. It's a byproduct of a really good digital strategy. But it's the same hook synced to different video content. Why does it have to be user-generated in the beginning? I mean, if we go viral, God bless us all. But in the beginning, you could easily take different pieces of video content, push that out organically or with paid traffic through digital ads, and can create that same repetition. If it's different content that they're only going to watch once or twice, then your tactics have to change, your strategy has to change, but the fundamentals are still the same, repetition. And we have worked miracles doing that, like really, really exciting stuff.
Johnny, you've described the music industry as being digitally ignorant despite operating in an e-commerce world. What do you see as the primary barriers to adopting the digital sophistication seen in other sectors like, an Amazon or Shopify?
I'll put it this way. Like, I came to this epiphany a while ago. When I get called into label meetings, it's because there's a problem. And the problem is usually the same problem. We're about to go spend $350,000 on radio tour for this artist, but nobody at radio wants to talk to him because there's nothing going on digitally. What can you do in 3 months? Well, here's plan A, plan B, plan C. Okay, how much is that? What should we spend on digital ads? Well, you've got 3 months before you drop $350,000. I would drop the same amount of money you drop on radio, $30,000, $50,000 a month. Well, we can't do that. Okay. So the the last meeting I had like this was at a very major indie, like they have major label money, but they're a very strong indie with artists that you know. I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm the fourth meeting in, and the head of A&R is starting to get it. Like he's starting to understand it and get his head around it. The management was still not understanding this because they're brought up on radio, right? And then it hit me. The head of A&R goes, Johnny, when you pull this off, man, you're going to make a couple people in this. And this was a genuine moment where he had it. He's like, you're going to make a couple people in this building look really bad. And that's when I had the epiphany. Seconds later, I'm like, oh, God bless you. You're thinking about the two people that are supposed to be creating a digital strategy for your artists. But really, it's the whole building, because all the people that are pulling the levers in the music industry right now have the prestige and the power. And these are intelligent people. These people, this is just human nature. What I'm describing to you is they're there because they understand and or have relationships with radio. And I promise you, all the people in the radio promo department of the label who have mortgages on their homes, car payments, and trying to put their kids through college, have no interest in seeing anybody succeed digitally. They want radio to still happen. So it's radio that's standing in the way of that. Nobody's interested in doing any kind of real R&D even to test things out, because the reality is it's much less expensive to make the brand name big enough for radio on a digital platform first, incubate them on a digital platform, and then it's going to be nothing but green lights towards radio. But they don't want to look at that because it's sort of the same natural human reaction, let's say, that Yellow Cab had to Uber when it came out. They would have been a far better place than they are right now if they just created their own app and tried to compete, but they didn't. They tried to eliminate Uber, and that's where the labels are now, because they don't want to let go of radio because of human nature. This is what makes me important. This is how I add value to this organization. I'm really, really good at this, and I don't want to have to learn digital. So that's the problem. But you mentioned the whole e-commerce thing, and I have to say this, last year was the biggest year in sales for live show tickets, I think, ever. And 100% of those tickets worldwide were sold on digital platforms. But yet when I work with artists to go in, and there's some artists that get this, and they're coming to me and hey, we want to start, capturing data and doing promotion for our tour stops. And how do we do this? Well, you have to understand that all of the ticketing platforms that exist are not created by Silicon Valley tech heads that understand e-commerce. They're created by music industry people that just want to sell tickets online. So there's a lack of e-commerce, right? So when we talk about digital coding and stuff, we should be able to know that a pixel's going to fire when somebody lands on a landing page looking at an artist at a venue that they might want to purchase tickets for. And then, a pixel's tracking code, right? Then that pixel is going to fire when they add tickets to the cart, and that's going to fire again when the purchase happens. And these are the ways that we train the algorithm in any given campaign to know who a buyer is rather than who the tire kickers are, let's say. And this is how you sell more tickets. We've sold out shows like T.G. Shepherd shows using this methodology when we're left unfettered. But the best an artist or a venue can do on a huge platform like TicketWeb, who's probably, I think, from the one, I haven't been on all of them from the digital marketing side yet, but the ones I've been on, TicketWeb seems to be the most advanced because they'll allow you to inject a pixel ID, but not the actual pixel code. And it's just cut and paste, whether it's an ID or it's code. But with code, I can do other things. I can also add, a Google tag, and I can add attribution software and stuff. But to be able to know who looked but didn't put tickets in the cart, we can retarget those people and remind them, hey, the show's coming out. Did you want to get tickets? There's people who abandoned the cart. We can send them a separate message with a retargeting campaign. Hey, don't forget your tickets are in the cart. The show's coming up. And then when the purchases happen and you build up that data, if you guys have you guys ever seen the Netflix show A Social Dilemma?
No, but I've heard of it.
Okay, I really recommend watching it, but I'm going to give you like a trigger warning. Okay, is if you're just a consumer, a human being, and certainly if you're a parent, it's going to be terrifying. Okay, but as a marketer, it's like an e-ticket ride. The possibilities, it's insane. Here's the takeaway. Each of the social media platforms maintain and track 54,000 different pieces of data points on every single account. So when you have, like, I'll give you an example of like how we sold out, but back in 2020, right before the lockdowns happened, we sold out a bunch of T.G. Shepherd shows because the promoter came to me in the summer of 2019. He's like, I want to try this thing different with you. I said, okay. And so like 3 different shows in 3 different faded map dots. There's like McMinnville, Tennessee, Paris, Tennessee, and Paragould, Arkansas. 600-seater theaters. The tickets were $61. And the promoter spent a total of $6,800 total across all 3 shows that were clustered together around a long weekend. And at the end of that, we sold 1,000 tickets. So we had filled up each of those theaters 50% of the way, but the promoter was profitable. He was happy. So, I have no idea like what the talent buy was or anything like that. It wasn't my business, but the promoter was happy, came back and bought 10 more shows in January of 2021. Obviously, most of them got canceled, but the first 2 we pulled off right before the lockdown happened. And it was the same show, T.G. Shepherd, in 2 brand new little towns with 600-seater theaters in Georgia. So those first 3 shows, when I marketed those shows, 3 different venues, each of them had their own, used a different ticket outlet. And I got the same answer from each of those ticket outlets on this support. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out where to put the pixel. They're like, what's a pixel? And that's when it hit me like, oh, these guys, this isn't tech. This is music business. Okay. So I didn't have the luxury at that point of even having tracking code, but I did have, at the end of that 12 weeks of promotion with those first 3 shows, there were 17,000 people that watched the 90-second ad 100% of the way through. That's not a bot. These are people that are genuinely interested in the artist T.G. Shepherd. And I know this because they wouldn't have spent 90 seconds. My ad, I promise you, wasn't that entertaining, So I took those 17,000 people. Now, there's 2 ways we can use that data. When I say 17,000 people watched this, keep in mind that I'm also looking at the back end of a Facebook ads dashboard. Not only did they watch it, but they watched it 100% of the way through. I can distinguish that on the back end. So it's different than the consumption metric you're looking at on YouTube, right? But people, your first look at this, you're going to see a consumption metric. Wow, 17,000 people. Well, that's good. Or you're going to have a feeling about that one way or the other. But those are 17,000 different Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts. And there's 17,000 different people, okay? So I can use that data to my advantage in 2 different ways. One way is I can certainly retarget those exact same 17,000 people for a return tour stop if we're coming back to the same places, right? Because they're geo-targeted within 50-mile radius of the club. But how do I use that to sell out the next 2 shows? Going back to what I told you about the 54,000 points of data, I can tell the algorithm, go find me a bunch of people who look like these 17,000 people here, but in these 2 new towns in Georgia. So if you think about this from the algorithmic way, it's like, let's say out of the 54,000 points of data, all those 17,000 people have like 800 things exactly in common. So the algorithm goes to find those 800 people with those 100 things in the market that I tell it to look for. And boom, we sold out those 2 600-seaters in half the time for 2/3 of the budget. So when you think about it this way, I mean, it's just so much more efficient, so much more effective. You get a number 1 on radio. God bless you. That's always been a dream of mine. I'll never achieve, but like when I was an artist, but who heard it? Who liked it? Who didn't like it? I don't know. In order to follow that up, you got to spend another $1 million in country music and do another radio campaign that gets to number 1 again. But on digital, we know exactly who saw it, who liked it, who kind of liked it, who didn't like it. And we can focus our budget to create repetition only on the people that we know are responding to it.
Johnny, I've heard you make a compelling analogy between radio in the past and digital discovery today. And in it, you note that fans rarely stumble upon new artists intentionally. So my question is, what strategies should artists be adopting to build long-term engagement in a world where, discoverability seems more volatile than ever?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. That's the best question, I would say, because I tell people here in Nashville, the artists that I'm working with, look, I don't have all the answers, but I'm asking all the right questions. And so I think the North Star, we start at 30,000 feet with the North Star, and that is stick to the fundamentals, marketing 101. It's reach and frequency, but don't mistake Spotify for radio. They're two different things. Radio is a place you consume music. Spotify is a place you consume music. It's easy to get confused. But the discoverability factor on Spotify still stinks. It's horrible. And Spotify weights a stream that's a program stream that comes from a playlist differently than an intentional stream. So what we focus on is, number one, is creating the repetition on the digital platform, but you have to honor the platform. It's a one-to-one exchange. It's not a one-to-many exchange like radio or a live show or TV. It's one-to-one. You have to know the psychological exchange and the difference between that, and that's going to shape your tactic on how to make that happen. All promotion, whether it was radio back in the day or whether it's digital, initially all promotion is interruptive. Like you've got to interrupt somebody's attention to give them to at least see you for the first time. But then the repetition comes in, right? We forget about this in the music industry because the repetition part of the simple marketing 101 equation was built into the machine. We just worked to get those songs on playlists on radio, and then once they got into rotation, we may continue to work to get it ratcheted up to a higher rotation, but the rotation is happening and the marketing is happening. But we don't have to manufacture that. We didn't have to think about that. Now on digital, where the consumer gets to decide what they're going to watch, what they're going to listen to, you have to change your tactics and you have to manufacture the repetition. So I use the example, like one of the best examples of this is one video, essentially, one music video broke Guns N' Roses. That was a last-ditch effort. They were about to be dropped from the label. And they finally got that one video into rotation. And then everybody, love them or hate them, you can't argue the impact that first record had on society. I still think it's the best-selling record in the music industry from a debut artist, if I'm not mistaken. But it was DOA. Nobody heard it. And when the rotation happened, it worked. But do we need music videos today? I think we do. I think you need to have a music video with it. But is it serving the same purpose? Does it have the same power as a video on MTV? No, it doesn't. Because if you think about how you consume content in your feed, think about the last piece of random video content that came into your feed. First of all, what made you stop scrolling and watch it and keep track of that every time that happens to you? And number two, let's say you watched that and it was satisfying. You liked it. It made you mad. It made you happy. It made you think. It made you feel something. It was entertaining, whatever it was. You really liked it. You really thought it was well done. Now let's say one of your besties a week later shares that video. So it randomly comes into your feed again. Maybe you watch it a second time and because it was so good, but certainly the third time that it comes into your feed, you're thinking to yourself, I already saw that. Your brain says I already saw that. So you scroll past it. So if we need to get to 7 before the brand of the artist and the melody and the words of that song become subconsciously recognizable, but on a music video, you can't get past 2 or 3 views per person. Well, how do we get to 7? Right? So we have to change the tactic and still push that hook, but we need to sync it to different music video stuff. So that's what we're doing here, is trying to figure out different ways to get people to number one, give them something different to look at while we still have that hook playing in the background. And we're focusing and manufacturing the repetition And I mean, a lot of people, because it's such a foreign, it's the devil they don't know when it comes to digital, especially in the music industry. And so people, I have this conversation so many times with artists. I'll bet you've had a few too. They're like, oh, I don't want to have to put on the makeup and put on the outfit again and get in front of the camera. I'm like, man, your big dream of doing this the old way with the record business would have you out on the road if you're a hot item for 6 to 9 months doing radio tour, having to put on the makeup and the outfit at 4 o'clock in the morning. And now you can do it from your home, but you got to create the repetition. And the beauty of digital is we know who saw it. We know who liked it. We know who didn't like it. So we don't have to waste money trying to shove our work down somebody's throat who's either never going to come into your market or isn't ready to come into your market right now. And we can focus on the people that are moved by it right now. And I think it's the quickest way to 1,000 super fans. And if you can do 1,000, you can do 10,000. You do 10,000, you can do 50,000, etc.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured interview. Stay tuned because we've got so much more value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Eric, as an artist, what do you find are the most challenging aspects to a music career, especially when you're starting out?
Well, I think one of the first things is just trying to get the direction of who you are as an artist, where you want to go, where you want to be. And, we've talked about it on the show a lot. Who is your target audience? Who you are? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What do you think would resonate with an audience? And so those are some of the things that I would feel being a new artist. Obviously, what I know now is different because I know these things. But for people that are out there like our audience that don't have necessarily any direction to go would be the first things that I would start off with.
And having the songs that
Absolutely.
Incorporate those elements that you're speaking of into it. That's so important today.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we started MUBUTV and why we started this new consulting service that we're offering to all of our insiders out there, because that is another one of the big things. I mean, that is the big thing, is like having the great songs. That's what it really starts off. Our friend Don Grierson always said, it always starts with a great song. So that's probably, besides putting together what your audience and what your target audience is the single most important thing. Where are your songs at currently today? Are you collaborating with people? Are you trying to go out to networking events where you can connect with other songwriters and stuff like that? So
yeah, and what are your strengths?
Exactly.
Are you a strong lyric writer? Are you a strong melody writer? Are you a strong musician, a player?
Right.
And it's really important to get really strong clarity on those issues before proceeding.
I totally agree, Rich. And, with our consulting services, we offer a myriad of different packages and we've made it super affordable for everybody. So, if you guys are interested out there in connecting with us on a coaching call, you can visit book.mubutv.com and start off with a free 15-minute discovery call.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We start with an initial 15-minute call where we can get a sense of who you are, what are the issues that you specifically have, right, and want to work on.
Exactly.
And we can go from there. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we tailor everything to your needs. It's not like a cookie cutter thing. We kind of really want to get to know who you are as an artist, where you at today, what's the snapshot of you as an artist today, and then start trying to craft something that's tailor-made for you. So again, if you're interested, visit us at book.mubutv.com for your 15-minute discovery call. Johnny, this is a two-part question for you. For artists who have invested in creating high-quality music but have limited resources, how can they identify the most effective platforms or channels to begin promoting their work? And part two of that question is, are there any specific early indicators or metrics that can guide them initially?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think the biggest mistake that I'm seeing artists make and industry make now is because, look, we're artists, we're vulnerable, we have like guts enough to put ourselves in a vulnerable position to be that artist to begin with. And then it feels yucky doing the marketing sometimes. It feels slick or salesman-y. But really, I think if we change the lens that we're looking through and you think of when we write a song as an artist or we sing a song live as an artist, our goal is to communicate with that audience and move them and make them feel something and make them see a different point of view or make them agree with our point of view or something like that. Marketing is the same thing. You're trying to write this song and you're trying to figure out how to communicate to somebody who doesn't know you from a can of paint and get them to give your music a shot. because it doesn't matter how good the music is if nobody hears it, right? And again, back to the Guns N' Roses story. So the mistake I see is a serious lack of consistency, because people, it's so foreign, it's so unfamiliar. They'll try something usually once or twice, it doesn't work, and they throw their hands up and they say, I don't know about this digital, it just doesn't work. Or some of the other people are really grinding and trying to create consistent content, but it's not working. So number one is consistency. That is, without a doubt, the number one biggest mistake. Like, you actually have to think of yourself today as a network or a radio station would. In essence, if you turn a channel on a television or turn the channel on a radio and you got noise, you got white noise, or, because static, because there was nothing on, what do? You go to the next station. And that's why the consistency counts. You have to continually be out there. Now, what to put out there that works, that's going to be different for every single artist, but there's frameworks that they have to work within. And it's a little sophisticated, but you know what, Rich? It's not as sophisticated as the circle of fifths. It's not as sophisticated as music theory. So if you can learn that, you can learn this, but you have to be curious. The metrics that to answer the second part of the question, I think too many people believe that, and I used to be one of these people in the beginning, that the algorithms are set up to push, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, so that your organic reach becomes so low that that's gonna push every Tom, Dick, and Harry into paid advertising. But that's not the case at all. The people that are really, really paying to advertise, that are spending insane amounts of money every year advertising on social media, those are the people that are floating the boat. They don't care about your dollar so much, because you're just going to be a little boat in a really, really, really big ocean. What they care about is, how do they make more money from the big advertisers? And the way that happens for the social media platform is watch time. Everything, like I always tell people, there's 3 rules when you're trying to make content that you have to assemble and create, and then do the post-production on this content for. 1 is watch time, 2 is watch time, 3 is watch time. When you focus on watch time, and then that's the metric that you're looking at, you can begin to get the algorithm will throttle you up organically, because you're benefiting the social media platform. So how do you do that? Some of this stuff, when I explain this to artists, and I'll show them certain hacks or certain tricks, they see it every day, and then they connect the dots. One of the ones that we see every single day on our feeds, like in Reels and in TikTok, is what I call the Pulp Fiction edit. They're starting with the end of the story first. And so then you get there, which is a weird way to do it, and then all of a sudden you're into the story. But by the time you get to the end of the video file, which, remember, started with the end of the story, that you can't swipe up, even though you know how it ends, until it concludes. So what happens is, you get to the end of the story, which is another few seconds on the second viewing of the video, which increases watch time. And that may seem so stupid, like, oh, who cares? But times 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million, that's a boatload of extra time. So you have to approach it from that angle, put together that content. The editing has to be right. And then what is I tell creatives, and especially songwriters, when they're talking about how to create this content, songwriters revel in the fact, and thank God they do, that there's 1,000 ways to say the same thing on this line. What's the best way to say it, right? So there's a tyranny of choice and creativity to put into that one place, but they all work within a framework, within the song structure, which provides the right guardrails, the right amount of discipline to be able to put that thing together. Well, video content is the same way. What is the framework that you're going to use to get people interested in listening to the end? Because you have to remember, they don't know who you are until they've seen you enough times that they become curious. And it takes a number of times for them to see your content on an individual basis before they even become curious in who you are. And then when they start watching, you better be consistent because now you've done the work and they're invested, but it better keep coming. And then the question with the relationship that you asked is, I think the biggest dichotomy that happens in the music industry right now is, and tell me if you guys agree with this, because I know you guys are, up to your armpits in this. When we had broadcast radio, you get a hit song, everybody hears a hit song a million times, and they come to the artist. They flock to the artist. They worship the artist. It is like an ivory tower looking down on the fans kind of a thing. There was mystery. And all that was great. I mean, I subscribe to all that. That's the way that platform worked. And it was broadcast. So we were all taking a lot of cues from the crowd. If our friends were like, have you heard this new Van Halen record? And you're like, no, let's listen. I'm already prepared to love it, right? But on the digital, it's a one-to-one exchange. It's one-to-one. And in that one-to-one exchange, you have to love them first psychologically. You have to reach out to them. You have to give more than just your song before they're going to believe that you give a crap about them. And that is where the relationship starts, and that doesn't feel famous.
Yeah, the consumption has changed. The way that we used to consume back in the old model was different because there were so much less platforms out there that you only had the record or the CD to get into, and then to, look at the liner notes, read it, know everything about it. Then you might have seen some kind of video on TV if it was a live performance. If we're talking about a certain time period. I think now the delivery device, like what you said, we've gone from the analog to digital where everything now is available. It's like, I look at it, I always tell Rich that it's like you've opened up the faucet and it's just like a faucet of water coming out and it just does not stop because it's just given to you everywhere. So what's happened now is that artists, a lot of that mystery has gone away. You might have a certain band like Tool, if we're talking about that world, that they don't do a lot of interviews. They really don't. They've created that old mystery. They don't even want people videotaping at their shows. They want everybody to put their goddamn cell phones down because everybody's paying attention to recording as opposed to just consuming the music. So I think we're just living, obviously, like what you're saying, it's in a different world now. So there's different challenges now. And the kids that are growing up now, that's all they've known since they've been born is an actual digital device. That's all they're doing. That's why their heads are down instead of looking up. So to answer that question, yeah, I just think it's a different way of engagement, but you're definitely touching on all the points that people need to be doing now. It's just that there's a lot of people that are stuck still in that old way of consuming.
I also think, to add to what Eric is saying, that there's another aspect to that as well, which is that I think in a world where music is free, where we have access to whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, on any number of devices we want, on any number of platforms, I believe the values, on a deeper level, that the values around what Eric was talking about have shifted.
Right.
And I think that when I speak about the values, what I mean is that, and you touched on this in just before we started, this discussion, when you said that the radio platform has a different value system. And that value system today is where music is free, everything is free on digital. The questions then become, even if they're subconscious, the questions become, who are you? What are you about? Why should I care? What do you stand for? These are all the things that are going to get that, what you called the repeat listening, the repeat, like what I think you specifically addressed it when you said, that you care about me, that you are addressing me, that one-to-one. And I think that's a very, very important aspect to your point about why that relationship has so dramatically changed. The values have changed. The platforms, that's part of the revolution. I think the revolution of radio to digital produced a revolution in the music business. Revolutions produce two outcomes: a change of habits, but more importantly, they produce a change of values. And that, I think, is the other aspect to what Eric was talking about, which I think it answers the point you
Yeah,
were saying.
and one final point before you jump back in, Johnny, I look at it too exactly like what you're saying. You know, the way that I look at the artist of today, I use the analogy, you're running for president now. You're shaking every baby, you're kissing every baby, you're shaking every hand. You know what I'm saying? Like
kissing hands and shaking babies.
Right, and not to make this a political thing, and it's not a political thing. I'm just saying, imagine you're running for president now. You have got to shake every hand. You got to kiss every cheek. You've got to go out there and win everybody. Like you said, it's a one-to-one relationship, and so you've got to beat this by attrition. You know, you're just going after that person one-on-one. So, getting back to your point.
Yeah, and I think artists have always, with a different lens, were prepared to do that work. Back in the day, it was get me on the radio and we'll win them over one by one on the road, right? And certainly the road still matters, but you also have to, in the beginning, win them over one by one on digital. But at a certain point, it hits a level of critical mass where it takes on its own life. And then guess what? Now you've got the mass, and you don't have it can change a little bit for you, but
right.
The waters are so muddy because as smart human beings here, we look at the way that we're being marketed to and we try to reverse engineer that. But we're still in between in this paradigm shift, in between this era where and this is why part of the music industry is just so far behind on it. All the multi-million-dollar brand names that they deal with were built and created on radio, and then we invented social media. So they already had a legion of fans who know, like, and trust them, know what they're about, and are prepared to love them. And then, so you have to be careful as an indie artist when you're looking at, what's Tim McGraw doing or what's, Tool doing. They had their audiences on radio, so their tactics are going to be different than your tactics. What works for them is not necessarily going to work for you because you have to build the audience and create that trust, So I think when we have artists that really understand the consistency part, I was just talking with my wife. They just had the CMAs. We were talking about Megan Maroney, and she is, I don't follow her, okay, but she is everywhere, like in every reel and every TikTok, just putting out content. And I've just recently noticed it, and my wife's like, that's been going on for 2 years. She outworks everybody on social. And so the more people are going to be able to hear her music and appreciate it. And that's ultimately what the artists want. And I think when they put down the yucky part and they try to figure out a way to be cool and share this and get people's attention and focus on writing that lyric, the lyric that's going to turn somebody who's never heard of you into a fan, when you do that successfully, there's no better feeling than that. That's just same feeling as finishing that song and it's a smash and you're like, this is a banger right here, like this. Because guess what? More people are seeing it, and ultimately, it's just the consistency part. Like some of the breakthrough that we've had very recently here with artists, like creating stickiness on Spotify, creating a campaign to promote a song that when the campaign is over and the money stops being spent, gained followers, gained regular, I call it like resting heartbeat traffic, in between campaigns on Spotify. And if you can gain that, we took one artist that, had nothing going on, and in one campaign, all of a sudden they're averaging and this sounds like it's so very little, but for $2,700, they're getting like 400 streams a day just on Spotify. It's not counting the other ones. So if you can do that once, imagine if you 10x that, right? What does that look like? That artist is like 4,000 monthly listeners, up from 1,500. But if you 10x that, or if you do that 10 times in a row at $2,700, which I think is doable for a lot of artists, then you know what? Like all of a sudden you're climbing up. But it's the repetition that matters. So if you can do that organically, or whether you do it through paid traffic, you have to consistently do it. This Spotify algorithm favors that. Every 6 to 8 weeks still seems to be the sweet spot. So if you go and you blow something up and you don't follow it up right away, if you're not thinking about a slew of releases but just one, that's a problem, So these are the sort of knots that we try to untie when we're dealing with artists, to try to reframe, like, this is a different platform. It's a different animal. It eats different food. It behaves differently. You have to understand the difference so that because some of the bigger artists can go back and forth between the two, right? Between radio and between social media.
Exactly. You know, Johnny, I want to move to a different area that you've spoken about as well, which is how do you envision fan data and engagement being used differently if artists had full control over their ticketing and promotion platforms, similar to how, I guess, you know, streaming platforms in Hollywood operate?
Oh, yeah, I love this question. Well, first of all, I think that one of the messiahs of the new music industry is Joe Bonamassa. I think that's what the new artist looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've talked about him a lot, how he's four-walled his entire career. You know, he four-walls his events, just everything. Yeah, that's the.
It's all him.
Yeah,
he has everything. And you know what? He knows, unlike the music industry, he knows who his customer is.
Yes.
He has an email list. He does all the promotion himself because he intuitively understood the difference between broadcast and between digital and where to spend the money, right? So I think that how to deal with that data, I always look to, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, and it's a little tricky and I can't remember if we talked about this earlier in the interview, but the law of diffusion of technology, right? It's the same with marketing. It looks like a bell curve. And with broadcast, you're hitting everybody and you're just pounding them, even though 38% of your audience is the early majority and 38% of your audience is the late majority, are not going to come into the market until after the pioneers, which is 2.5%, and after the early adopters, which is 12.5%. So if you're focusing on, like, what we focus on is who is in it to win it right now. We're always running campaigns that are pushing out to a cold audience, to people who don't know this artist from a can of paint. And then the data that we look at to answer your question is who looked at this video content at least like 50% of the way through. I can see that on an ads platform versus, let's say, boosting, by the way. So if all you've ever done is boost, anybody listening, you don't get the same sophistication that you do on the back end of an ads platform for Google or for Facebook. But when we know somebody likes it, then we'll continue to target them for the content. And then it's, what is the content? What else haven't they heard? What else do they need to know about this artist? So that's what I kind of look at. Like, who's the things that a bot can't do are watching a video 50% of the way through, saving a video, sharing a video. These are things that are the most important metrics to me because it tells me they're real people. Clicks can be a bot. You know, so like, and this is more, I guess, like digital marketing sophistication. But when people are trying this, and I know that the industry just doesn't get it as a whole, but when you click on an ad out of a sponsored ad out of a feed, that first click can be a bot. So we designed the objective of the ad campaign to focus the algorithm on a second click. The first click might take you to like a link tree. And the second click, when they choose their platform, that's the person right there. That's the one we focus on. And then we're able to just keep retargeting the people that are initially liking it. And that continues to grow. And then we get to a point where it begins to take on a life of its own. But consumption, you know, who likes it?
You said that spending large amounts of money on digital promotion only to pull a song after 2 weeks of not going viral is a very flawed strategy. How do you think that artists should rethink the metrics for success in digital marketing, especially for new releases?
Great question. And let's talk about artists and the industry. You know, not to repeat myself, but radio, which is so powerful and worked so well for so long, was firmly anchored in the fundamentals of marketing, reach and frequency. So that's the thing to focus on. How can I get them to repeatedly hear this song? You know, how can I get them to consume that content over and over and over again so that they hear the song enough that it becomes a part of them? And, to answer your question directly, if we think of the way that the industry and all artists, because this is how we were marketed to, and again, we're reverse engineering it, how were we marketed to? They're going to go to radio for at least 6 to 9 months before the dust settles and they make a decision on whether or not to push that song farther if it's still got legs, or try to swap out the real estate for another song. And then the thing about, so if we think about that in terms of football, right, we all know inherently, and we understand radio, it's a ground game, it's a game of inches. Just move the needle enough to get a new set of downs, but we're going to grind until we get into the end zone, and that's going to take 6 to 9 months. And the detachment here with radio is that, again, they don't have to manufacture the repetition. But when they go to digital and they're thinking if it doesn't go viral in 2 weeks, we're going to throw in the white towel and call it a day and say it didn't work. Well, right off the bat, that's a complete departure from the fundamentals of marketing. Where's the grind? How can you make that $100,000 from the record label last? And how much content can we put into the feeds of people that like it? And how much consistency can we create with the 100 grand, 50 grand, 10 grand, 2 grand, right? If we're asking the question through the lens of marketing fundamentals, then that's the answer. And so it's virality is not a destination. It, honest to God, is a byproduct, a regular byproduct of a really good digital marketing strategy. So it's kind of like they understand how to grind and have a work ethic for radio, but on digital, they're playing the lottery. And it's like telling your landlord, I'm going to pay the rent as soon as I win the lottery. Like, no. That's not going to happen, you know? And here's the funny thing, unless it goes like really, really crazy big, like in a chain smokers kind of a way, so big you get the record deal, you know, or Dasha, so big you get the record deal. If you don't have the consistency muscle toned up, if you don't have the next bullet in that gun, even when you win, you lose. I mean, I for all intents and purposes, with the exception of this like little new project that we did, for a long time I just stopped doing like promoting singles for artists because I'm like, even if we nail it, I don't want to take your money. Like, you know, it's we need to have a 4-song release because then we're building up momentum as opposed to wow, we got really lucky, but now we've got to decide like what's the second song going to be. We need to take the pictures. There needs to be video content. Like if you don't have it all lined up in advance, you're not going to deliver it in time to take advantage of the momentum.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about what you're saying, Johnny, is I remember talking to my friends at Sony, and they spoke about this very thing when Lil Nas X broke, because they said there were so many things that were so freakish about that particular release. Number one, it was the very first song he had ever written. Number two, it was the very first song.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. It was the very first song he had ever recorded. So all the fundamentals, all of the elements that you're speaking about, none of that was there. There was no follow-up. There was no additional material.
You had
there
to race
was
around to build that.
Yeah, there was no tour. There was no nothing. And it's like my friend put it perfectly at Sony. He said, we all got into the Ferrari and we floored it to a red light. Yeah, exactly. That's the exact analogy. And I thought, man, that's so good. Yeah. And it's like, you know, without thinking, like, you know, usually you floor it to on the Ferrari when there's a tour, when there's something that you can actually promote. And he said, you know, look, to Nas's credit, he took 18 months after that to really build a career for himself. But, you know, most artists, I mean, we can name artists until Thursday that have these one-hit wonders that have, you know, done really well, and then nobody cares, and they've never been heard from again because they don't have the what you're talking about. They don't have that follow-up, the consistency, and the, you know, the drive and ethic to get that done. I want to ask you something, Johnny. You know, this is more on a personal and a philosophical, observational level of you as a professional. You know, having worked with so many artists and acts over the years in so many aspects of this business throughout your own career, what do you feel holds artists back from success in their careers?
Permission. They don't give themselves permission to be artists. I think that manifests itself in 1,000 different ways. Yeah. You know, I always say the magic that they seek is always can be found in the work that they're avoiding. And so for artists who, I mean, I'm a firm believer too, and this is just because this is my lens, but I really focus on personally working with artists that didn't choose music chose them. You know, that was for me. I mean, that's why I'm still here. I tried to get out of the music business, and then it just kept pulling me back in, you know, to quote The Godfather.
Right.
But it really is like you have to give yourself permission. And the ones that don't at a smaller level, like just won't be vulnerable enough and give themselves permission to be vulnerable, and when they're writing a song, are going to write mediocre stuff, you know? And we marvel at the incredibly talented writers. And yes, that's talent, but it's also permission. They know how to put themselves in that space and be vulnerable, and they're okay with it. And then that just keeps increasing, and the challenges change, but you have to give yourself permission to, when you graduate up to a grade, right? When you climb another rung on the ladder, that's always going to come with imposter syndrome, right? But don't fear the imposter syndrome. Wear it like a badge of honor. Like, okay, remember like when you were in I had a middle school, right? So 8th grade was the top of the middle school. We're the oldest kids in the school. We run the whole place. Next year, you're a freshman, and you're a schmuck, and it's scary, and the lockers are bigger, and it's all really weird. But you know what? You got through it. It's the same thing here. Like, give yourself permission and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the more that you're doing it right, the more uncomfortable it's going to become. And there is a repeatable and reliable way to break you as an artist that it's out there. You just have to keep being willing to fail. And here's the beauty about, like, when it comes to digital, which is how everybody's going to break today. When you fail digitally, I want to remind everybody, it's anonymous. It means nobody saw it. So you can't get like Billy Squire, Like if you screw it up, nobody saw it, so you get to try again until you hit it. And I think the artists that earnestly embrace that, and they're like, okay, because we all had to go through that when we started playing. I mean, we all sucked in the beginning, and then you got good, Well, this is just another one of those kind of challenges. So yeah, I think it's permission. They deep down, the ones that don't give them permission don't make it.
Johnny, we always like to ask our guests, have there been any books or films that have been particularly inspiring you throughout your career that you think you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll tell you, from my marketing career, like in terms of trying to break artists, there's basically two doctrines that my company philosophy is built on in the strategies and tactics. And I love, this is one of my marketing gurus who I saw just showed up on the Bob Lesser's podcast a couple of days ago, which is Seth Godin. And the book is Permission Marketing.
Right. Great book.
When I read that, I got through the foreword, the introduction, and the first two chapters, and I was levitating, because I'm like, I'm already doing this stuff, and now I know why, and reading the rest of the book it's a blueprint. It's exactly right. Treat it like the Bible. And I'll tell you, if you read that, you'll be like, it'll connect a lot of dots on what's currently not happening correctly for the music industry. They still don't know who their customer is. There is no permission marketing. But that would be one of the biggest books there. And the other doctrine that we work with to help create relationships is a guy named Marcus Sheridan, who started a company called Salesline. And these are both old. Like, I read Permission Marketing in 2014. I thought I was brand new. And then I'm embarrassed to tell you guys that I just looked at the book and I'm like, it came out in 1999. This is ridiculous. Like, this is crazy, And Marcus Sheridan had this whole thing with Salesline, check that out, because there's strategies and tactics in there that he uses for the corporate world that can be manipulated and tweaked to work for an artist. But the idea of constant content and different, he calls them value bombs, just different ways to give, I guess. Gary Vaynerchuk is another guy I follow. Like, jab, right hook. Great book. Yeah. What can I do to share whatever? It's like not your lunch, but when you're in there, I see some of these guys and the guitar players, like, showing how to do guitar leads and stuff like that. I think that's great. I can sit and watch that. It can benefit me right now. And guess what? I'm also learning. Oh, you're a guitar player. And we need more guitar gods, don't we? What happened to them? We stopped marketing them.
Yeah, very, very much so. Johnny, what advice can you offer our listeners who are really serious about wanting to pursue a career as a recording artist? I mean, we've had this great conversation with you where you've given so much insightful and wise, information. But, from the perspective of people starting out who are really serious, and, as you've pointed out, it is a different world today. So what advice can you offer to, our audience who really want to pursue this as a career?
I think initially that, you have to understand, number one, And this is the first thing that was the impetus for starting Daredevil to begin with. I was partnered up in a recording studio when I came back to the music industry. I partnered up with a buddy of mine in a recording studio on Music Row, and I was doing marketing for that. And we started working with a bunch of indie artists that some of them were really good, really important indie artists. And I would ask everybody that came in, just because I'm a geek like this, like, okay, what's the plan for marketing? And they're like, well, we're just going to throw it up on iTunes and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I just kept, my eyes, there's no plan. And they're spending, 100% of their budget making the donuts. And, you guys know that the record industry model for success when it comes to money and time and HR allocation and resources is you're going to get maybe 5% of the budget to make the donuts, maybe. And the other 95% is going to be on promoting it. So it doesn't matter how good your art is. If nobody hears it, they don't know. So then how do we do that? I think the way that you justify to yourself that $2,500 spend, or what is it now? It's $3,500 on a Les Paul, because it's a tool that you're going to use. And of course it also, makes your nipples hard because you're like, oh, this thing sounds so good through the amp. But it's a tool. It's a big investment, but it's a tool. I think the best tools that an artist can buy right now is, because you can shoot 4K on an iPhone at 24 frames per second. So you can work miracles with an iPhone, but lighting, for less than $2,000 or $1,500, certainly for less than the cost of a really good guitar, you can set yourself up with a lighting rig that will just forever change the quality of your content. And then there are a million free tutorials online to teach you about lighting. Like one of my gurus for cinematography is a guy named Parker Walbeck. I don't know him.
Yeah, Parker, he's great.
I learned so much, I'm a part of his whole, I paid for the whole thing.
Right.
But in the beginning, I spent hours on his YouTube channel learning about lighting shots and all this stuff, and it changed my world. So, and what I found, because we got into video production at Daredevil out of pragmatism, because the content that we wanted, we were getting high quality content, but it was worthless because they weren't looking through the right lens. And I don't mean that in a cinematographer way. I mean like in a strategy way. So once I had to get into that, because it was a big unknown, it was a devil I didn't know, it was actually, as a creative, a really fun itch to scratch. So I would buy the light so that you can constantly put out content. And then the other thing I would remind you, and I love it when I have artists that come to this epiphany, because then you're going to need to do post-production. You're going to need to edit the video content. And I tell them, you're like a ninja on Pro Tools now, aren't you? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, remember when you first started with that? They're like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, now you're so good at the software, which is very sophisticated software, that you can make that tool work for you as fast as you think. And that's what makes that flow creatively happen. Well, you can do the same. If you did it for Pro Tools, you can do it for a video editing software. A better one. Now, for years, I made miracles happen on iMovie. But then I had to outgrow it. So whether it's Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro or DaVinci or whatever, pick one and learn it and just suffer through the first 80 hours of sucking. And then you will get to a point where you can work that tool just as fast, and it's just as fun to work as Pro Tools. And now, there you are. You've got the machine. You have internalized everything that you need to do to put out consistent content, and it doesn't cost you anything. Like you don't have to go outside. And I think that's probably the best advice, because it really is consistency. Like, it's funny. I use Old Nas X, and I use Fancy Like. Those two songs broke on TikTok. And I know tons of artists who broke on TikTok, or I'm aware of tons of artists who broke on TikTok or broke on YouTube. I'm sure there's been some artists that broke on Spotify. I don't know who they are. Those are the outliers. So why did they break? Again, it's we focus on the virality because those songs went viral and they had dance sequences and everything, but don't over focus on the details. Pull up out of the woods at 30,000 feet and look at fundamentally what happened. How were they consuming Fancy Like? They're watching somebody dance. Fancy Like Applebee's on a first date. Swipe. Fancy Like Applebee's on a first date. Swipe. Fans are like, ask me. So, wow, okay, that's user-generated content when it goes viral, and God bless us all when we go viral. But it's the repetition that was happening. So until you get something to go viral, the repetition can be created by you. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. And that's the fundamental, because they keep hearing the song over and over again, but it's synced to different video content. You know, let me ask you guys this, because you guys are so good in the record industry. One time I'm just hammered with one of my publisher buddies, and we cooked up a way. This is back right when Britney Spears got her emancipation or whatever, right, and got her freedom back. And we're like, we have the perfect way, bring her back and make her relevant again. She releases one single, and instead of spending like $1 million on the video or $500,000 on the video or whatever they would, like outsource 15 videos, find directors, up and coming directors on the internet, and create a whiteboard where everybody puts their idea up. And there's two rules. One, you got to honor the brand of Britney Spears. Two, you can't do the same idea as anybody else. Can you imagine the press behind that? Like 15 weeks in a row, you release a brand new music video for the same song, create that repetition, and everybody just can't wait to see how it's going to be interpreted next. You know, it's like different things like that. Like that's the advice. Like, be thinking about consistency, be able to make the donuts. You've got a rig in your house to make the music. You need a rig in your house to make the content too.
Yeah, you can target them directly. Johnny, I want to ask you, how can our audience connect with you? What is the best way that you like people to connect with you?
Certainly, they can go to, they can reach out via email at info@daredevilproduction.com. Production is singular. That's probably the best way to do it, because as much time as I spend on social media platforms for my clients, I'm pretty horrible at it on my own.
Okay.
But certainly, you know, a DM on Facebook for Daredevil Production or on Instagram for Daredevil Production is a way to make that happen as well. That's probably the best way to do it. And remember, production is singular. There is no S. If you guys know how to type, I promise you, your ring finger is going to want to hit that S.
Okay,
so
all right.
you know.
Great. Then everybody out there, that's how you want to connect with Johnny. Johnny, we want to thank you so much. This has been invaluable. This has been really incredible, and we would love to have you again, because, you know, the business is evolving and changing, and you are somebody who is really tapped into not only what's going on, but why it's going on, which makes you so invaluable. So we want to thank you so much for doing the show.
Well, thank you real quick. And you guys got 2 minutes so I can share like something that we did, that just to kind of give you like a proof of concept, to use your word before, that what we're talking about works. People have a hard time ingesting it. We implemented this strategy with an artist friend of mine who knew me, loved me, and trusted me enough to give it a shot. And he had, the first 2 singles he had, we used a very reputable playlist promotion company that's used by, Atlantic Records, Interscope. This is a legit company. And we got lots of streams, but the discoverability factor stinks. The amount of saves that happens is usually about 0.8 to 1% on Spotify per 100,000 streams. So you're going to get like 800 to 1,000 saves after 100,000 streams. And it's what they call program traffic. So you're not actually learning about the artist. You're just stumbling across the song because it's next on the playlist. But we did it a different way, through video promotion, creating repetition on Facebook and Instagram, driving traffic to Spotify. So he spent about the same amount of money that you'd spent on those promotions prior to that on his last release. And man, like, we tripled the amount of follows. Instead of his best performing song in the playlist promotion, I think he got like 1,600 saves out of 130,000 streams. So it's like 1.2%. When we were doing this a different way, the streams were less, but the saves were 16.8%. We stopped that campaign on October 1st. And this artist, these 3 releases that have been out, basically started at 0. Okay, there's a release before that, but he didn't promote it, so it's basically non-existent. But y'all, like, he's still to this day averaging 400 to 500 streams a day, because 99% of the people who saved it immediately added it to their own playlist. And this is the big thing. It's intentional traffic. So he went, in the last 2 days, he went from 3,700 monthly listeners to almost 3,900 monthly listeners, actually increasing rather than decreasing, because it's just a different way to do it, so you can find fans if you're approaching this on a digital platform the right way. And that's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you for the 2 minutes.
No problem at all. Again,
I'd love to come back on, and
absolutely.
I'm honored
We'd
to
love
be
to
on this. You guys, your
thank you.
podcast is,
Thanks.
you have nothing short of icons on this podcast. So I couldn't believe you reached out, and I was blessed and honored to do that. So thank you. It means a lot to me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. What just came to mind was, do you remember Oliver Stone's movie JFK?
Yes.
It's a 3-hour film, and I remember seeing that film and feeling like it was so dense and so much great filmmaking. I could see it again and again, and I have. I've seen that film 3 or 4 times, and I get something from it each and every time. That's what this conversation with Johnny Dwinell was like.
Yeah.
It was, you realize you're talking to somebody who has such a rich and deep understanding of the process. I mean, on a cellular level, he really understands what it is that connects with the consumer. That's what we're essentially talking about here, Eric. What connects with the consumer. And one of the things that he talked about that I thought was so important was the idea of investing in quality tools. I think you spoke at the top of the program where, allocating budget toward essential tools, like for content creation, such as, videos or a good lighting rig if you're a live performer, learning video skills, learning how to edit, how to produce high quality content, frequent content, understanding that this is a process that goes on and on. It's not just about, here's my song, come buy it, or here's my single, please listen. It's about building a relationship with an audience.
Yeah, and I also thought one of the other points was consistency and quality. He stresses the importance of consistency and the capacity to create high quality, frequent content independently to avoid external cost. Kind of like front loading, creating all this content and all these assets before you launch. They always talk about the idea of putting like 100 pieces of content ready to go before you launch, whether it's a single or a record, whatever it is that you're doing. And it's the idea of having that consistency and quality, like what you talked about earlier with, my messaging with the previous project that I was in, and how that all kind of worked together, even with my new thing, with my new single, and how all of those elements it's all about creating that consistency and quality. And, it's a very important aspect of what it is that artists need to be doing today.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And the other thing that I thought that he talked about a lot, which is really important for new artists, is the idea of digital strategy over radio. Oftentimes you hear people who don't necessarily understand the music business is that it's not about getting on radio, not initially. It's about building the relationship with digital tools, online,
right,
to build the fan base. Radio comes
later, right?
Comes last. It's the last thing. You have to go to radio with the story,
right?
With the story, it's like, what's publicity? Publicity is, the purpose of publicity is to spread the story.
You illustrated that great, ironically enough, we're going back to the Pete Gambarg episode where you did it on video, where you talked about the whole thing with 21 Pilots. And the whole idea of how that built from the ground up, and then the story drove them going to radio.
Absolutely. But they didn't go to radio, I think, until the 3rd album.
Right.
But it's that process of,
building the building blocks.
Remember what Pete said, which floored me? He said, the first show we did on the first album in Philadelphia, 6 people in the audience.
Right.
Can you imagine? You putting out your debut release on Atlantic Records and 6 people show. But that shows you the dedication of 21 Pilots.
Right.
That shows you their work ethic, that you build it a fan at a time. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I also thought the importance of visual content, and he emphasizes the crucial role of visual content in platforms like YouTube and TikTok for breaking new artists into the industry. We have these platforms now that are breaking artists to some degree, and this is something where it's going to be interesting to see if this trend continues. You're seeing all these labels that have been picking up artists from TikTok. And that's a whole other dilemma that we've talked about, the whole idea of like, are artists even ready after that happens, that discovery? We talked about this gentleman, this artist that broke on TikTok, Lil Nas X, and that whole idea of like, they discovered him, and then they had to hurry, and that was a whole other story that we talked about, and building that story behind an artist that didn't really have any other material or anything to follow up with. That's another dilemma with this idea of breaking people on these platforms. But I think it's an important one in terms of the importance of visual content, and how he emphasizes that crucial role that platforms like YouTube and TikTok are playing into the music discovery of artists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said it perfectly. This is a career. This is, it's like a job. It's a life.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.